Welcome to Lake Perris Adventures. Today, we're going to head to a natural spring source inside the park, and we're going to learn how natural springs are one of the main sources of change, but also one of the fundamental sources of life here in Lake Perris State Recreation Area. I'm your host today, Joseph Esparza. This is going to be a lot of fun, so come on for the adventure.
As most of you guys know, Lake Perris's water doesn't come from the hills surrounding the park, but from Northern California. That doesn't mean, though, that there isn't natural springs that surround our park. And right after a rainstorm, this is a great example to see some of these springs in action. So this is a natural spring that is right here in Lake Perris State Recreation Area that's flowing from groundwater off of the Bernasconi Hills. So we're going to go take a look at it. Natural springs form in a variety of ways. They can either form through divergent plate or fault boundaries, where the faults go against each other, they separate and water seeps in. They can happen in fault block systems, where two plates or two kinds of rock formations or geologic blocks fall into each other, lifting the water table in one section, or from hotspots. As we can see here at Lake Perris, we've got a great example of a natural spring. You may also notice that the plant community has changed a little bit. As opposed to the drier hills over here, it's far more lush, far more green in this area, and that's of course because of the seasonality of the water in this region. So the water here has, like all the springs at Lake Perris, is from the ground. It's groundwater that flows in our hills, and this water is going to make its way towards the lake and help fill up the lake. Some of the plants we have around here are the elderberry. You can see some berries that are not quite formed, but they will be shortly. Right, and so that's one of the more common plants we have around here. Now we also have some plants that you might want to avoid, such as stinging nettle, which is over here. It can cause a pretty painful rash onto your skin. And over here we've got some California sage right there, and some California wild manroot right there, wild cucumber. We even got a nice kind of monkey flower right here. So as you can see, even the plant community changes when we get more water. It's almost like a miniature oasis here at Lake Perris. As you can see, that water just coming down. Beautiful. I would just like to emphasize again how rare this is that we get to see natural spring water coming off the Bernasconi Hills. It doesn't happen too much anymore. You can just see into here. Beautiful springs. Now, historically, these springs are very important because it was around these yearly or seasonal springs that Native Americans in this region would build their seasonal villages and communities. It's where you could have a reliable source of water, and it's also a place where animals would gather, which made for good sources of food. As this groundwater brings water and sediments down this valley right here, we can see as it gets closer to ground level, we get what we call alluvial soil, which is something like this. Kind of small pebbles, right? Kind of a sandy texture it's got. And that's called an alluvial soil. And as you can kind of see here, it kind of fans out from this narrow spot where it comes right there. Watch how it kind of fans out throughout this whole area, right? And that's what we call an alluvial fan. And that's got some sand, what you would call like sand sediments, some small pebbles. And it's from all that sediment that the water was rushing down from up higher in the hills. And this is where it comes down to rest. So the larger sediment is going to stay here, and some of the smaller ones are going to be carried down into the lake. So it's really neat. Not only is it a great historical, a great plant-based feature, but it's also a really cool geologic process in action. Right? Also would like to stress how important a spring like this is for the dry community we have. As you guys know, the months here at Lake Perris and around the Inland Empire are very dry. There's not very much groundwater, but however, look around me. There's just lots and lots of puddly water all the way around here. Okay, and that comes from that groundwater. And this is vitally important, not only in this area, but on these other hills. This groundwater is eventually going to seep into the soil, and it's what's plants such as the brittle bush right here, and California sage or other coastal sage scrub and chaparral plants are going to use and reserve for the entire year in order to survive. These plants know that the hot summer is coming. It's already April 10th, and they're pretty lucky to have this much water right now. As the hot summer is going to be approaching, they're going to be using this water in order to survive throughout the year, using a series of tap roots, which go down deep, deep, deep to collect this water. And this brittle bush really got large, as you can see, probably because it's right here next to this good water source, right? But they also have adaptations which help them to limit evaporation. But again, guys, how critically important this moment is right now, where this groundwater is coming off of the hills, sinking into the system of the plants here, and of course contributive to the plants' growth. The animals eat the plants, and it's really the cycle of Lake Perris's biome really starts with water. And it's just incredible to be able to see it right now. Did you guys know that Lake Perris even has its own waterfall? Its own natural waterfall right here at Big Rock. So it doesn't look like much right now, but when it rains, this fall actually is pretty impressive. You can see it all the way from the museum, and it's a whole bunch of water that just comes from the top of Big Rock into the surrounding Bernasconi Hills, comes straight down, and it makes for a spectacular cascade. So while it might not look like much right now, just come back here when it's rainy or come up to the museum to see it, and it's pretty spectacular.
We hope you enjoyed this Lake Perris adventure, where we learned about natural springs and how natural springs are one of the most fundamental sources of change and sources of life at Lake Perris State Recreation Area. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Lake Perris wants to keep bringing you content like this on a regular basis. Thanks.